actually. Let's start the show with Randy. Come on up, Randy. Yes. Randy Powell.
Thanks. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, great. Well, I'm happy to be here. It's been a long drive. I came all the way from North Carolina by car, and it was okay. I wanted to see some friends throughout the country and had the opportunity to do that. So I was thankful for that, and it's good to be back in LA. Spent a lot of time here last year working on this project with various people and starting to make applications, and you're going to learn about all that tonight, and I hope you're all going to leave here with a really thorough understanding of what is vortex mathematics, or what's commonly known as VBM, or vortex-based mathematics. And like most things in this project, that actually wasn't a name that that Marco or myself applied to this. Most of the terms and names you hear actually come from all the different people that have interacted with Marco and also myself over the years, and many of them experts in various fields of science and math and other things. And they have contributed much of the names and much of the things that you're going to hear about as this has slowly been described and uncovered over the years. So the biggest, most important part of our project is not really us, it's everybody. It's everybody here and everybody in the world who wants to be involved, because we're trying to create a truly open source project, a project that's for everybody, that doesn't have any restrictions, and that is a truly open research and independent investigation into life. So that's just a little bit of what we're trying to open up here. So my title says the pathway of infinity. So most people, when you think about infinity, I think it was Edgar Allan Poe who had put forward the idea that infinity was not even a concept. No one can even conceive of infinity. We all have these vague notions, but I'm actually going to give you a way to think about infinity, because it works a little bit differently than the way most people are taught about it. So let's look at our next slide. So there's our equation. You're going to learn a lot about that. I put this slide in here because I found that in my town. It was on the bottom of a skateboard that somebody chained up to a post in my town, and no one knows who it was, but I guess they had heard of me or heard of this. So we'll keep moving for now. We'll come back to that. Now, most people have a math phobia. We all grow up scared of math. I like this statement. Every time I see a math word problem, it looks like this. If I have 10 ice cubes and you have 11 apples, how many pancakes will fit on the roof? And the answer is purple, because aliens don't wear hats. We all grew up learning a lot of obscure and obtuse things in math, and the most common thing you always hear is, well, when am I ever going to use this in my life? I'm never going to use this, and people get bored and fall away. So there's a lot of wonderful things in the world of analytical math and analytical science, and I support all that type of investigation. But the problem is that a lot of times you can learn about all that, and a lot of times people still walk away not really having a better understanding of themselves or their environment as a whole. And so we're really trying to take a different approach to math. It's a holistic approach where we're going to combine every concept and every problem that you could do all into one simple formula. So we'll look at the next slide. See, is that going? There we go. All right, so the reason that most people know about us, of course, I did a TED Talk, which went out there and got viewed a lot, and that helped, I think, expose our project more. And most people who come to it have come with an interest in the energy side, and so that's largely what we're known for, the applications of this math towards energy production in the realm of what's often referred to as 0 point. Some people call it free energy. And that is energy that you can tap directly from the vacuum, from space. Energy that's just inherent to our environment, the underlying animating force. And so through this project and mostly through the teachings of Marco Rodin, who you're going to meet in just a little while, we've learned and begun to understand how to apply numbers to equations to produce such a thing. So let's take a look at how we're going to do that. I start with this image of the number 9. Everything you're going to learn about tonight is really revolves around, and I mean that literally, the number 9. Now, generally, people say, what are you talking about, the number 9? You know, you mean 9 apples or most of the time we're just taught about numbers as quantities, and that's a valid way of looking at numbers. But there's another way you can look at numbers too, which is equally as valid and most often ignored, which is the quality of numbers. Numbers that have certain principles that they abide by, certain conditions that they meet that are unique to them. And the number 9 has been reverenced throughout all the ages. You see it very prominently in the old Irish myths, amongst the Norse, the Chinese, Hinduism in the Middle East, and even Christianity. You see a lot of talk and discussion about this number 9. It's very big even in occults, and they're particularly interested in its aspect of being 3 squared, or 3 times 3. And we often say we live in a universe that's squared. You see that come up in so many of our equations, but I won't digress into that right now. Ultimately, what the number 9 represents for us, that I hope you can really ingrain tonight, is that it represents an energy that's currently not modeled, not really approached in science or math. There's a lot of different names for it. People call it dark energy. It's ultimately the animating force. You can call it chi, you can call it prana, you can just call it energy, because really E is sort of undefined in the equations as they stand. The thing that distinguishes this energy that you're going to learn about is the fact that it's linear. Okay? It doesn't bend, doesn't warp or curve. It's eternal, and it's never changing. And that's why the number 9 works so well to represent it. Because if you take the number 9 and you multiply it, for instance, by any number, could be 18, 27, 36, 45, 54, 63, you can go as far as you want. If you add those numbers back together, they always equal the number 9. Okay, that's a common practice. Some people call it numerology. If you want to be technical, you can call it decimal parity or digital roots. There's lots of different words for doing this. And why do we do that? Ultimately, it's because we want to find the underlying pattern that exists amongst all equations and numbers. So the number 9 is the only number that has this unique quality, where no matter what you do when you multiply it, it always reduces back to the number 9. It never changes. No other number will do that. And so you're going to see exactly why that is so important. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so this energy, this linear energy, is the source of the warping and curvature of space and time, which is commonly known as relativity. And in Einstein's relativity, as you can see in this traditional image that's used to explain relativity, gravity is explained by the warping and curving of this fabric, this lattice structure. And usually they use these squares to represent it. And we were actually able to discover that it's not actually squares that's modeling this, it's diamonds. And when you model it with diamonds, you're actually able to reveal this underlying lattice structure. But there's no explanation really in relativity for the mass, for what is actually warping and curving the space. And that, we believe, is this energy. We call it etheron energy. It's been referred to by many names in science. People call tachyons, which is supposed to be a particle that travels faster than light, and that would be true. It's been referred to as monopoles, was suggested by Maxwell in his electrical equations, which causes symmetry in nature and symmetrize his electrical equations, and that would be true of this. You can call it gravitons, which are supposed to be responsible for gravity, and all of those qualities would be true of this energy that we're talking about. So when Einstein's relativity was developed, sort of like Marco and myself, it wasn't Einstein, most people don't realize, didn't solve his own equations. They were solved by Carl Schwarzschild, who's not nearly as famous, mostly because he died right after. But Schwarzschild's solutions to Einstein's equation predict this thing which we've all come to know about called black holes. And there's something interesting about black holes that can help you understand this energy much more deeply, because what we found in this and all this mathematics is that the key to the universe, as Jose was saying, this energy of God, we often hear about the word of God, it literally is sound, resonance, vibration. And this energy, represented by the number 9, is the source of time and motion and vibration, which is what all our scientific studies ultimately really break down to. Interesting thing about a black hole, you never hear this addressed much. They call it a black hole because the matter is supposed to be so dense that the escape velocity of light is not enough to escape out. So it sucks everything into it, even the light. And conventionally it's thought that the fastest thing traveling in the universe is light traveling through the vacuum of space. But when you start thinking about sound, we realize that sound has this opposite quality to light. Whereas light travels very fast in the vacuum of space, and as it gets into denser medium, it slows down. Sound is the opposite. We're told that sound doesn't propagate at all in space because there's nothing to vibrate in the vacuum. And then the denser and denser matter gets, sound moves faster and faster. So it's commonly known if you pass a sound wave through the earth, it's faster than in the atmosphere, because everything's packed more closely together and it vibrates more quickly. It's the basic principle of physics. What's interesting about this is when you start to think about black holes and you think about matter that's so dense that light can't even escape it, and all conventional equations break down. They all go to infinity. And no one knows what's going on. It goes to infinity. It goes to another world or another dimension. We actually believe there's another side to the black hole. But I also believe that there's something that transcends the speed of light, and that is sound near the core of a black hole. When matter is compact, that dense, the light can't even escape it, sound penetrating that matter actually transcends the speed of light. And that then becomes this higher dimensional energy, which is the source of our physical world of form and motion. So this was a recent image from a recent article that came out. I wasn't referring to Transformers, but why not take it when it's there? You can actually hear stars falling into black holes. So now they're really starting to be able to observe some of these sounds that are going on and the resonance that's there. Sometimes it's referred to as the music of the spheres. Another term for it is hypersound, and this has come out recently with technological applications of what's called phasers. That would be the sound version of lasers. Hypersound is one of the closest things to this energy that's postulated in modern physics. They talk about it in quantum mechanics. And when I don't remember what the frequency ranges are, but when frequency gets so high that it can't actually propagate as a wave, they postulate that it becomes what they call a quasi-particle. And I believe that that particle is the closest thing that they're observing to this higher dimensional energy, which we're talking about with the number 9. Okay? Ultimately, what the number 9 is, it's an emanation. Okay, we've been criticized a lot. People say, you're talking about the ether. Don't you realize over 100 years ago they figured out there was no ether? Or maybe it wasn't that long, but somewhere around there, with the Michelson-Morley experiment. Now, this was an experiment where they tried to measure the drag of the Earth through space, and they said, well, there was no drag, there was no resistance, so there was no reason to postulate this medium, which all of our grandparents and their parents believed in, called the lumiferious ether. A subtle medium of energy spread throughout the cosmos. The difference is Einstein supposedly said at that time, well, the only other explanation is that it must be an inertia ether. And that's what we're talking about. It's an emanation. It comes from the center of mass outward, linearly, in all directions. And as it penetrates matter, it's imparting the mass, and it also causes it to warp and curve, just like vines going around a branch in the jungle. All right, it is the source of that curvature, and more than that, it's the drive. It's an engine. It's what keeps all the galaxies spinning and the planets spinning, and even at the subatomic level. Okay, the non-decaying spin of the electron, and it was another scientist who suggested when Marco asked him if he could do a brief introduction to explain this work. He said, "I can do it in one sentence, and that is what you've discovered is the source of the non-decaying spin of the electron." So when people say that perpetual motion is impossible, well, perhaps they're correct, but because none of us are obviously perpetually going to be here to find out. But when you look at the spin of the electron, it's been spinning around the nucleus of the atom near the speed of light, and that's been going on since the Big Bang, apparently, and it's never slowed down. And there's not really a good explanation. Quantum mechanics is making certain attempts, but there's not a good explanation of what is the source of drive for this electron spin. And we believe that is this energy of the etheron, that is ultimately the sound, the resonance, that every atom in this room, every atom that makes up your bodies, is singing right now, but we can't hear it because it's out of our frequency range. And that's, known and accepted in physics. Okay, so all physical matter is a warp or a curve. There are no straight lines in nature. Doesn't matter if it's a bullet shooting, it's going to warp and curve with gravity. Okay, so it's an important thing to realize. Things may appear by optical illusion to be straight in nature, but nothing is straight. Okay, so when we get down to trying to make energy, to trying to solve our energy crisis, it doesn't make sense to force energy through straight lines, through straight wires. It simply creates friction, and it doesn't work. That's why we have so much inefficiency in a lot of our electricity. Even lightning come down out of the sky, it curves and arcs helically. Okay? So when electricity is moving in its path of least resistance, it moves in a curve. It circles. Okay? Ultimately, what it's condensing down to, this is what we call the primal point of unity, and that is that place, you could say, within a black hole, that place of fusion, that place where everything comes together into absolute wholeness, and that's where this energy emanates from, and that is the source of the Word of God, if you will. Okay? So you might be wondering what's going on with this image. I'm going to change gears a little bit. I just wanted to give you a brief introduction, and I'm going to tell you just briefly a little background about Marco and about myself. I hope he doesn't mind me stepping in and relating his stories for him, but I thought this was a valuable one. So where did this all start? How did any of this knowledge come about? How did we find out about this energy? And ultimately, how did we learn how to apply it, which is what's happening now? Well, we have to go way, way, way back. I don't know how far back. Before I was around, when Marco was a young man, a young child. He became very interested in sound on his own. Okay, and this is the old Tarzan show, and Marco is fond of telling the story that he learned to imitate the sound of the kookaburra, which apparently wasn't even native to the area where they're saying. I think it's an Australian bird. And Marco loved to imitate the sound of this bird, and he would do it all over the place, always making the sound, learn how to call it out real loud. And he noticed when he was doing this that it was affecting him. It was affecting his brain. It was affecting his dreams. It was affecting his consciousness, something about this sound and resonance. And it became something that stuck in his mind and began to form a lot of the way that he thought. As he got a little bit older, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was probably around 15 or 16, he became very interested in this question of what is the secret of intelligence. He was interested, like many of us all are, I know that I am, in trying to get a comprehension of our reality and trying to make some sense out of all this madness. And, but when you look around the world, there's so many intelligent people, but, and I've had the pleasure of meeting and being able to learn from a lot of them, and often I've still left feeling that I I didn't really gain that comprehension. And trying to keep up with the level of information going on now, we all know is impossible. It's simply just too rapid, and there's too much comprehension involved to analytically get it all. So there must be some other way. And Marco wanted to know, if we're only using 5 to 10% of our brains, how do you tap into that underutilized portion of the brain? Okay? So he did this with a thought experiment we call Henry Kissinger versus the alien. And this is one of my favorite stories. So the story goes that Marco was trying to think at the time, who was the smartest man in the world? And some of you might not like that answer, but he came up with Henry Kissinger. He was who he considered to be the smartest man in the world. And so he performed a thought experiment where he had Henry Kissinger and the smartest alien from another planet, and they were engaging in a debate. And, everybody knows when Kissinger talks, it can be very drawn out, and, he's got that voice. And as Marco was visualizing him speaking in his head, he was wondering, where does Kissinger's intelligence come from? And he's not contriving it. He's not making it up, right? It just seems to be coming spontaneously. He's just being lucid. And as Kissinger spoke, in his mind, Marco zoomed in on the lips, and he saw, as he came to the end of his sentence, that there was a sound there on the lips. There was actually a literal vibration or a sound that inspired his next thought. And immediately, something happened. He jumped up, he yelled, "Eureka!" And what he really said was, "I understand." And what he understood was that it was the language, it was sound, that was a source of intelligence, that was affecting our brain, that was allowing us to be lucid and clear and to access the inherent information, or what religious people might call the divine intelligence or all-coherent intelligence that is available to us all. Because he realized that our brain is really more like a receiver. It's an antenna. And so what we try to do through living the right lifestyle, by eating the right foods, and by doing the right kind of meditation, is to create an environment within ourselves where we can tap into this energy. That's fine, you can go there. Okay. So this inspired a journey for him, and he began to search through all the different ancient knowledges of the world, all the different religions of the world, and he found this common thread throughout, that they all seemed to be onto this. I mean, we didn't go to church as kids and paint pictures. Everybody sang, right? And there seemed to be this common thread that throughout all the religions, the most sacred and holy and cherished thing was the name of God and the intonation of the name of God. And so as he searched through, eventually he came to what is his own faith, which is called the Baha'i Faith, which some of you might be familiar with. And the Baha'i Faith, what is central to the faith is this notion of the most great name of God. And the prophet of the Baha'i Faith, Baha'u'llah, claimed that he was revealing this word, which is in its comparative case called Baha, and in its superlative or supreme case called Abha, that he was revealing this name, that it was actually the most great name of God, that it contained all the other names of God within it. And he literally spends a lot of time in the scriptures describing how this word contains the hidden mathematics and the secrets of all the sciences available. And this was around in the 1850s or early to mid-1800s that all this was going on. And he was very pointedly claimed that. In fact, I even found statements in those scriptures where he claimed, if you understood this word and the harmonics and the mathematics inherent, he said, you would be able to create an energy that requires no fuel and produces no fumes. Okay? And so when Marco came across this, he realized in the Arabic language that this was revealed in, or in the Persian, or even ancient Hebrew, or in Sanskrit, there's a math to the languages that underlies all the letters. Sort of like we have in English numerology. The difference is in these old languages, the vowels were never written. So the structure is a little bit different. And it's a big part of the language. If you know, I've had the fortune to study a little bit of Arabic and really learn about it, which is kind of how I got into this. It's an art about putting the language together and the mathematics and the equations inherent even in the poetry. And so where our project really started, as bizarre as it sounds, was that Marco took this name and he decrypted it. He found an equation out of it, out of this most great name of God in the Baha'i scriptures. And this is what that looks like. All right? And this is what we're all going to become experts in tonight. All right? It's just a simple cross-section of a circle, which is where a lot of our great discoveries come from in math and science, as simple as it is. The equation for the name of God in the scriptures is 1, 2, 5, 1. Okay? It equals 9. And it's said that this number 9 represents this protected hidden energy. And so the number 9 was placed at the top. And the other numbers just drawn around in a circle. And what Marco did was he knew that the 2 and the 5 were connected to the 1. So when this was just an empty circle, he just drew a line from the 1 to the 2. You can go back, yeah. From a line from the 1 to the 2, and a line from the 1 to the 5. And that's really where this started. Everything else you notice here is just two groups of parallel lines. If you take that line, you got this line, and this line. And then if you take this line from the 1 to 5, you have this line, and this line, right? And that gives you this symbol. And that was how it was initially developed, just by drawing a series of parallel lines. But immediately it became apparent that there was something more there, something very interesting, and something very coherent. So we'll move forward. Now, I'm going to digress one more time, and then I'm going to come back to that, and I'm going to tell you about how those numbers work. But I just want to explain to you also my own approach to this and why this is significant to me. When I was a small child, about 4 or 5 years old, I had an experience as well. My father passed away when I was about 2.5 years old, and so I really grew up with this awareness of death and awareness and thought about the other world and what happened after we died. And I had this question that really was burning in my mind at that time. It might have been a strange question for a 5-year-old to be asking, but they often do. And my question was, I wanted to know, what does a human soul look like? What is its appearance? And the reason I wanted to know is because I thought, well, if I die, I would like to be able to recognize my father in the afterlife. And I want to know what he looks like. And I knew that he wouldn't look like his physical body. And so I started this question was burning in my mind. It was a couple days later when I was at the hospital with my mom that I saw this image of the caduceus over the door, sometimes called the medical symbol or the symbol of commerce, the staff of Hermes. I didn't know any of that at the time, but I saw this symbol and immediately it just struck me. I said, that's the answer to my question, and obviously that's why it's on the hospital door. And this is what a human soul looks like, and I became totally convinced of that. And so I went to church with my parents, and as usual, I wasn't really paying attention, and I started thinking in my own mind, well, where does this thing exist in my body? And so I started visualizing, closed my eyes and visualized, and I saw that this caduceus lived down here near the base of my spine, and that it was just kind of hanging out there, dormant. And I was interested in what it did, and so my next logical question was, well, what happens when you die? And I had this vision in my mind that these serpents would start winding their way up my spine, and they would enter into my brain, and when they entered in my brain, the wings would open, and my head would open up, and they would fly out of the top of my head. And this kind of is an image that I found later that shows that happening. Of course, I had never seen that at the time. But that it would fly out of my top of my head, and it would land in heaven on Cloud 9, which is my next. So there you go. Cloud 9. And some of you guys might remember that from the show Bewitched, which was real popular when I was a kid. And that's where I guess I got it from. And it's also the name of Marco's daughter who's here. I told her I would mention her in my presentation. And I believe that this thing would fly out of my head and it would land in heaven on Cloud 9. And so I was in my mind visualizing this caduceus laying on Cloud 9, and I was looking, and my father was there, and his own caduceus, and I just thought, well, this is cool, but this is kind of boring, What happens up here? What do you do? I was concerned that my father might be pretty bored up there. And what I noticed was that if I looked ahead, that there was a great light ahead. And I thought, this must be the light of God. And so this must be what you do in the afterlife. You look into the light of God. And so I looked into that light, and at that point I had an experience that I wouldn't attempt to describe to you in words. It was kind of like experiencing everything all at once, all space-time in a nutshell, like James Joyce would say. It was a experience of eternity, but it happened in a split second. And my reaction to it, to be frank, was complete and utter terror. It scared me so bad that I literally jumped out of my seat, and I just wanted to get out of there. And I didn't want to think about it anymore. I really did my best to try to blot those thoughts out, but nonetheless, this idea stayed with me throughout my childhood. Now, I had a normal childhood in so many ways, but what happened later that really interested me was when I was a teenager, or I should have mentioned this last part before, that experience of this kind of all space-time in a nutshell, eventually I associated it with this image, which is called the Ouroboros, or the serpent eating its own tail. I saw it as kind of the higher form of this caduceus. You could say it's the ring, and I knew that this was connected to sound again. But ultimately, where this didn't all really sink in until I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, I read my first book on yoga, and I came across this picture, and they were showing this thing with this caduceus in somebody's body. They called it kundalini, and they said the same thing about it going up the spine and exiting through the head, and they were associating it with the number 9, and it just blew my mind to such a degree to see that I became instantaneously convinced that there is a collective consciousness, because I knew that there was no way at 4 or 5 years old that I could have read about this or known about it. I grew up in suburban Virginia in a Methodist family. We had absolutely no exposure to yoga whatsoever or any other kind of foreign mysticism. So as soon as I read that, that was my eureka moment, and I began searching through all these different traditions. Ultimately, where it led me was to the Middle East as well, and I'm skipping ahead over many years and a lot of study. But I became very interested in the Arabic language and in the intonation of the name of God as it was practiced among the mystics in the Middle East. And I started studying very intensely the mathematics behind that, and I found that there was this legend among these mystics, many of whom I studied with in person, and they said, you would learn all the names, the 99 names of God, and they said, but ultimately, at the end of the cycle, there would be revealed what they called the most great name of God, and that it would contain all the other names of God within it. Of course, at this time, I'd never heard of Marco Rodin or the Baha'i faith, but I knew a couple things about it. They called it dhikr, which means remembrance, and the most great name, and that this would be ultimately the secret that would be revealed. And it was associated in the legends, of course, with the Prophet Muhammad as taking this shamanic journey that he would take, where he went on his own exodus or exit from his body and traveled through the different levels and met the ancestors. And what happened when he returned was that he would return with these. Is that working? He would ultimately come before the world tree, or what they call the Lot tree, this ultimate form, and that when he went beyond that to the place where there was no conception, when he would return, you would be given power songs, okay, revelation, true language, true harmonics, that this mathematics would then be revealed. And so I became really intense into this. I spent many years studying on this and studying the math, and trying to understand and search through the different texts for this most great name, but had never been able to find it. But I knew a couple things about it from my own experience. I knew that it would be associated with the number 9, and I knew that it would connect these two images together for me of the caduceus, which I knew must have some connection with DNA. I wasn't an expert, but I could make at least that association, and this Ouroboros. And then I knew that these two geometric forms were crucial, and that they would be associated with the number 9 and the most great name of God. So that's just a little bit about the background. Where that ultimately led me to was this idea through studying the numbers, that ultimately numbers must be real, that there must be a true mathematics, a real divine mathematics, and that numbers must really literally be defining our space and time. And I remember it was about 2 days before I encountered Marco's work. I was having a conversation with my brother, and I said, I'll know what this all means, and I'll understand the most great name when I understand how numbers create geometry. And I didn't really have a clue at the time, but I knew that there was a connection there, and I knew that it was related to sound. Sound is ultimately the source of form, and that's what I was learning through the scriptures and through the different researches I was doing. And when you look at things like cymatics, you can see that very clearly. When you vibrate a medium at various frequencies, you get these very clear geometric forms. Those are just good examples, always appearing in the hexagon, which we will see why. So I knew this much. I knew the number 9. I knew these two shapes, and I knew that ultimately it would be an explanation of how numbers explain geometry. Well, literally, I'm doing my meditation one morning, studying on this scripture which said, you know, you really have to understand the number 9 to understand all this, and you should recite these words in order to get that understanding. So I did the recitation, and immediately upon finishing, my telephone rang, and I picked up, and it was an old friend of mine who never called me, except this one time in the morning. He said, he even told me, I don't even know why I'm calling you, but I just saw this video, and I thought you would be interested in it. He said, to be honest, I don't understand what any of it means, but it just looks like something that you would like. And so he sent me this video with Marco Rodin, and that was when I first encountered Rodin aerodynamics. And there he is, Marco, you're going to meet in a few minutes. And within 5 minutes of listening to Marco talk and the video presentation he had posted up on YouTube, and this was, I guess, right around the time when YouTube came online, and he said that he had this equation based on the number 9. He was associating it with these shapes, which you're going to see, and he said it was based on his decryption of the most great name of God. And so all that coming together right away, I mean, I'm not a genius, but I said, okay, I'm interested. I want to find out more about this. And of course, at the time, I had no idea that I would be up here lecturing about it. But he made this statement, which is, the saying is that mathematics is the language of God, but I say that no one is speaking God's language. And perhaps that's why there's so much confusion in the world of mathematics today. He ultimately presented this symbol, which we just looked at a minute ago. And so now I really want to get into this and explain to you what is this concept of vortex math, now that you have a little sense of how weird the initial story is. And, you know, we're just like you. We're just normal people. The interesting thing is how far normal people who pursue an idea can really take something, and I think you're going to find out about that. So ultimately, what you notice about the symbol is that there's two aspects. And you'll find this dichotomy in every type of research that you can possibly do in life. All right, the two aspects of the symbol are really easy to recognize. One is this green lazy 8. Sometimes it's called the infinity symbol. Okay, it's a circuit, it's a closed loop. And the other one is this red pyramid, okay, which is representative of what we call flux fields. All right. Now in science, there's really only two things you can study. Doesn't matter what branch of science. You can study matter, which is discrete, it's local, it's measurable. You can study that, and a lot of our science is the study of matter. And that's what we associate with that green loop, the physical world of mass. Or you can study what are called fields. And we're supposedly have all different kinds. You got electric fields, magnetic fields, gravitational fields, all these different fields. But they're much more mysterious, harder to find. They seem to be spread out over space and time. They seem to be linking things instantaneously. All right? And ultimately, I found that this dichotomy was in everything that we research, whether it's mind and body. You could make that same parallel there. Whether it's the world of quantum mechanics, pulse phenomena, discrete phenomena, or the world of relativity, which is a continuum, spin continuum. Okay, every different area has this duality there, and we started to learn a little bit about how to define that with numbers. All right, so you can see a little animation here All right, and we're going to talk about the first thing that was noticed in this. And I just want to show you how, just following a normal logic, you could make a really profound discovery. All right, so this again is that loop that we were discussing. We'll pause it right there. Okay, what you see with these numbers that I want you to notice is there's a sequence here. Now, if we start with 1, we know, even at the Big Bang, they tell us everything started as one thing. It was all 1. The universe is 1. If it's not 1, then it's not a universe. Okay? What happens to 1 if we follow that line? It doubles. It becomes 2. What about 2? 2 doubles, becomes 4. 4 then doubles, becomes 8. All right, well, what happens when you double 8? It becomes 16, but we have a 7 here. But remember, we were talking about looking for that underlying pattern. What is the pattern that underlies the equation? And if you add 6 and 1 together, you get 7. All right, and since 16 doubled is then 32, which added together equals 5. And 32 doubled is 64, 6 plus 4 is 10, and 1 plus 0 is 1, which gets you back to 1. I'm just going to be quick. Don't try to retain everything. I'm going to have to talk fast with a lot of these numbers. 128 comes back to 2. 256 comes back to 4. 512, 8. 1024 comes back to 7. You can go on forever doubling, and you will never break that pattern. 124875, 124875. It's really significant. You know, we use that for the binary code. Doubling exists all throughout nature, and that is one of the first clues that there's something really going on here. I'll show you a few examples. So we call that doubling, the universe squared. And by the way, getting back to that 1, we know 64, that shows up all over the place, not only in science but in mysticism. Hey, you see it in the I Ching, the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, which is obviously a famous one. And there's been a lot of work showing how the I Ching is coding various phenomena in DNA and is a very sophisticated mathematical code. All right, you see the 64 all throughout the Mayan calendar as a big marker for cycles. And interestingly, of course, their pyramids are all based on the 9 levels. Okay. More importantly, there are 64 codons that come together to form our DNA. Okay. So that was the one that struck me right away as being very significant, and we'll see a little bit more about that as we go. All right, so we see that this doubling process exists throughout nature, but it doesn't really stop there. So you have the 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. You can double. It doesn't matter if you start 7 doubled as 14, which is equals 5, doubled as 28, which comes back to 1. It doesn't really matter where you start. I've actually been able to show that there are several unique doubling sequences, and they all abide by the same pattern. But what if we go the other way? It's interesting, and we'll stop right here. You can actually go the other way, and you'll find that it's halving. Half of 1 is 0.5, half of 0.5 is 0.25, which is 7, 0.125, which is 8, 0.0625, which is 4, and so on and so forth. You can half forever the other way, and it'll never break that pattern. Could be significant. Let's see what we might find based on that. So there's your halving, 0.03125. I didn't get that one. Okay, keep going. And so ultimately that then breaks down into powers of 10, you know. 0.5 is 5 over 10. 0.25 is 0.25 hundredths, thousandths. And we come back to 10 thousandths, which again lines up with the 10, hundreds. Okay, always the ones, the tens, and the hundreds are going to line up parallel. And I won't go too much into that and what that really means, but it shows that even our powers of 10 and all our fractions abide by this system. Okay, all squares and square roots. And that's just another image showing that same principle. Okay, now ultimately where this stuck in my head right away, being a musician in background, was in music. Because we know that musical scales, if you look at them, are doubling. You can see from C to C to C is doubling, or from D from any note. And I was able to do extensive research once we got into how this affects prime numbers to show how there are only 12 unique doubling sequences that exist between these base systems. And that's important because it actually defines the notes on the musical scale. Ultimately, all these numbers and everything we're talking about, remember, it's all about sound and harmonics. So the music right away became apparent to me. And that was then the next base system calculation, and I found that there's actually 12 of those unique doubling sequences, just like the 12 notes in the scale that exist between base 10 and this base, but that's a little technical. Cell division, obviously a big one. You know, you can look here. You start with one cell, it becomes 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and it's at the 64 that they actually begin to specialize and become unique cells, where the blood cells or heart cells, brain cells. So it's sometimes called meiosis or mitosis, and that doubling sequence is definitely there. So what's interesting about that is each one of us here tonight came here through a doubling process. And there you see it. We each arrived here through a doubling sequence. You came into this world through doubling. So it doesn't really get more personal than that. It connects to everything, though. Dr. Scott Nelson from the University of Hawaii has done extensive work showing how this connects with plants and how this doubling underlies all prime numbers in plant sequence. He's known to us, of course, for his work he did on the Great Pyramid. I won't go into that. Just continue. But ultimately, when you look at the growth of plants and the sequencing of plants, you can see these same number patterns there. And him being one of the top plant pathologists in the world, he was able to take that very technical and demonstrate how it works. This is why we make the claim that you can use this math to produce unlimited food, because we actually have a hands-on grip using this math of time, of the sequence of events, of how they occur, and how you can even control the sequence of growth by manipulating these flux fields, so you could grow food very fast. It underlies the phi spiral or Fibonacci, which is very famous in math. We've been able to show that there's an underlying doubling sequence within all these different patterns. Okay, here is a work that was done initially by Nassim Haramein, where he actually showed that if you close the phi spiral and you lay it on the equation of Markov's equation, that it actually curves right to the crossing point, but not precisely. It's always slightly off, showing that the point is even more precise than the spiral itself. Okay, and this is a little bit of technical talk that Scott Nelson had there about, this is called phyllotaxis, and this was for an educational program that we were writing. I'll just skip through that to save time. Here again, showing how these numbers fit in with what's called a DAISY integer matrix, and it again is just proving that these patterns are not contrived or false. And there's another more technical image showing how that works. You can predict all prime numbers through this, and we've been doing extensive work, Marco and myself, showing what that all really means. Okay, next one. All right, so ultimately we get back to this equation. So we noticed right away the doubling. That was significant. We see that all around in nature. What else can we learn about this and what this energy is trying to tell us? Well, there's some other things you can find about these numbers being harmonic. For instance, if you take the number 1, you say 1 times 1 equals 1, right? Well, if we travel along this symbol, we go both ways. If I go 2 times 5, that equals 10, which is 1. If I keep going, 7 times 4 is 28, which reduces back to 1. 8 times 8 is 64, which comes back to 1, right? It's like there's a vibration that's being passed here, creating constant values. Just to show you it works anywhere, it's kind of a magic trick. 2 times 2 is 4. If I travel, 4 times 1 is 4. 5 times 8 is 40, which is 4. 7 times 7 is 49, which reduces back to 4. Okay? Pattern's always there. You can do that with any number. Because numbers are nodal points. They're points on a wave. And that's what reality is. It's a warp and a curve and a wave. It's coherent waveforms. And for any waveform, there has to be a point where it stops going up, starts going down, and vice versa. Okay? And that's what these numbers represent. All right? Ultimately, actually, let me go back there. Just show you a couple more things. I'm going to go through these really fast. I'm trying to give you an idea of the kind of coherence that exists here. So we learned about this circuit here, and there's lots of interesting things there. I could go on and on about it for days. We didn't even talk about family number groups, which is another important part. But I want you to look at this field, and ultimately, what is this field? We're saying that this pathway, any matter in motion, doesn't matter if it's water in a hurricane, or air in a tornado, or if it's electricity going through a wire, this is the path of least resistance, and it's being spread out by this field. For instance, if you look at this angle, remember I told you this is two parallel lines. This angle we call 3 right here. Well, if you look at any numbers and you add them at this angle, 1 plus 2 is 3, 9 plus 3 is 12, 2 and 1 is 3, 8 plus 4 is 12, which is 3, 7 plus 5 is 12, which is 3, and if you end on 6, 6 and 6 is 12, which is 3. All right, so everything at that angle equals the 3. It's equaling the field. If you go the opposite way at this angle to the 6, 8 plus 7 is 15, which is 6, 9 and 6 is 15, which is 6, 5 and 1 is 6, 2 and 4 is 6, and 3 and 3 is 6. Very interesting. Okay? So you start to get this idea about how this field is spreading out matter. This emanation is actually dimensionalizing reality. And we were able to turn it into a true coordinate system that you can use for travel in outer space or for modeling anything. All right? So, but we haven't really talked about this 3 and 6 very much. What are they doing ultimately? Well, interesting thing, if you double 3, what happens? 3 doubled is 6, right? 6 doubled is 12, which comes back to 3. 12 doubled is 24, which comes back to 6. 24 doubled is 48, which comes back to 3. You can do that forever. It just oscillates, 3, 6, 3, 6, 3, 6, 3, 6. Which is very interesting. I mean, when you look at reality, we don't really see a lot that does that. In fact, there's only really one thing that comes to mind, which is magnetism. Okay? This is then how we're starting to define polarity. And the pole is the number 9. Forms the axis of symmetry. Everything is being symmetrized by the number 9, which is never changing. It's an emanation that comes out and it creates the shape and form of everything and the pathways of motion. It's the source of time, and we call it quantum time. So when you're looking at those plants, and we're talking about producing unlimited food, being able to control the sequence order of anything by manipulating this field, you start to see that time itself really is quantum. We're living like in a movie. It's happening at a certain amount of frames per second. It's just way beyond anything that our human brain can pick up. So we see it as continuous. Now that might sound crazy at first. People, what are you talking about? You know, that's not real. You just made that up. But actually, you can actually observe it pretty easily. I'll show you how. Well, chaos theory is one way that's been able to back this up. Because when you look at things, scientists love to throw around the word random, and people get really mad at me all the time because I ask these stupid questions like, what do you mean? And no one really actually has an answer if you find out. Well, listen to scientists talk about, they'll throw around. Chemists will tell you all the time, oh, the chemistry, it's just randomly, it's just random. Or an astronomer told me, the galaxies are just randomly distributed throughout the cosmos. And I said, well, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean they just appeared out of nowhere? There's no laws of physics governing this? I mean, there was no actual force and ultimately they have to admit, no, well, there must be some sort of mathematics to it, right? There is no such thing as random. Random is what you say when you just don't have an explanation. And chaos theory was able to show that very well, that you can look at, for instance, trends in economics that appear to be completely random. One day, it doesn't match up with another day to another, but when you look at them over time, what they found is that they were actually doubling, okay? So coming from a totally different discipline, they were able to show the exact same thing. Again, it comes down to that dichotomy. There's only two ways you can look at life, okay? We can call it free will and determinism. If you follow that doubling sequence, it's always deterministic. You always know what the previous step was, and you're always going to know what the next step is. Okay? If you follow the path of matter, it's very deterministic. And it's led materialists to believe that all reality is deterministic. Of course, when you get into this quantum aspect, some of that seems to come into question. And that's where you get into those fields. That's the free play. Okay? But if you trace it, always predictable. Okay, this was an article that came out recently. I won't go too much into it if you want to read it just while I'm mentioning. it was basically just a group of physicists who've come out recently now saying that they are actually looking at time like this as a mathematical sequence, not as a straight line that's just running or as an added dimension. Okay? It's a discretely pulsed phenomena. It's a firing sequence, okay? And numbers do this. They have a firing sequence. They have an activation. This is important for energy devices, okay? A perfect way to see what I'm talking about with this quantum view of time is that, I'm up here moving around, and you're seeing it as continuous. It looks very smooth and fluid. But really what's happening, if you talk to physiologists or any, we all know this, there's a series of rapid pulses coming from my brain, electrical pulses, that are activating specific muscles, and athletes know about this. They call it muscle firing sequences. And so actually, if you were to be able to look at me at a slow enough frames per second, you would actually see that I was moving in a disjointed way. It's all happening at very discrete pulse moments. Okay? And this is how time and numbers work, even our own heartbeat. And what we're talking about with the number 9, it is the heartbeat of existence. And this image is one that was done in a study, and it actually shown that heartbeats themselves are fractal in nature, that they abide by this kind of mathematics. Okay? Ultimately, this pulsing, these fields, they're creating geometric wave patterns. These were some of the smallest images taken of bonds happening at the atomic level and how light is affecting them. And you can see that same wave pattern beginning to show up right there. Okay? I wanted to show you this video, but we'll skip. It's just about how waveforms occur, what they call periodicity. It's if you take a pendulum and you start swinging them back and forth, and they're different lengths, they start to form very coherent waveforms. But we won't get to that tonight. All right? So ultimately, you can see how this symbol is starting to get at the world of science. Okay, it's starting to get at the world of math. And it challenges it to the utmost. Traditionally, we're all taught that numbers are arbitrary. They're just a man-made convention. They have no fundamental reality. And we're going right in the face of that and saying, no, numbers are real. They have they're not just quantities, but they have actual qualities. And that is defined by their angles and their ratios. Okay? And so that there is a true mathematics to creation, starting from physical unity through its dispersal and eventually to its recollapsing back into itself, and that is the source of drive for creation. That ultimately what this doubling and these numbers are doing, they're making a vortex, all right? And they're being oscillated by magnetic fields, which are known to be toroidal or to be a vortex. If you keep going... ultimately, let me go back, actually. There's one particular point I wanted to make, one more. Another way that this is so different from the conventional approach is that conventionally we're taught that numbers, arithmetic, does not explain geometry. But in this system, numbers are geometry, all right? And it's very easy to see. There's 3 particular geometries that we could go into any geometry. There's 3 particular ones that form the foundation. And it just so happens they're the only geometries that by themselves can tile a space without breaking. Okay? What do you think the geometry of the 3 is? Anybody? Triangle. 6? Hexagon. All right? And the 9 is then defined by this diamond right here. Okay? Perfect diamond. All right? And you'll see why. So these 3 shapes, the triangle, the hexagon, and the diamond, are the only shapes which can tile a space. You'll never find another one. You can put different shapes together to do it, but by itself, that will be able to tile a surface topology, and that becomes very important with what we're doing. Now, I associated this 3 and 6 with oscillating. The 9 stays in the center. 3 and 6 always must converge on the 9 and then diverge from it. And when it happens, it creates this vortex of doubling, all right? Now, a confirmation of that can be seen right here out of a scientific journal. Next slide. And this is actually showing the magnetic fields and how they conform to triangles and hexagons. Okay? So it's actually been proven in the laboratory and shown that magnetic fields do take these shapes. So we're not that far out as people might think. All right? There is evidence. ultimately, there is this kind of threeness to everything we study in science, which is why 3 is so important and why it forms the basis for the 9. Interestingly, if you ask any indigenous person in the world, there was a study done on this, doesn't matter what culture, it could be Papua New Guinea or in the Amazon. If you ask them, what's the middle number between 1 and 9, every single one says 3. Okay, now I'm sure most of you would have said 4.5, all right, because we're all adulterated in school. But the natural way to think of numbers is harmonic, and that's ultimately how they work. And you can see this threeness, this trinity, in almost every endeavor of knowledge. I just wrote down a few, and some of these were suggested by a scientist named Peter Plichta, who noticed the same thing. You have length, width, and height and dimension. Our dimensions are 3. You have past, present, and future, time. Okay, if you look at rays, you have alpha, beta, and gamma. You have ionic, atomic, and metallic bonds, simple, double, and triple organic bonds in organic chemistry. Okay, and you have sugar, starch, and proteins. Those are basically what's keeping us alive. So those are just a few examples. You know, you can put down hundreds of these, that there really is this tri-part division in nature, and it's because of this mathematics. Or maybe that's a chicken and an egg question. Okay, just some examples where you can see these shapes popping up in nature. They're all over the world, whether it be at flowers. You see that triangulation clearly there. Again, in cymatics, you see this perfect hexagon being demonstrated. It's the most prevalent shape in nature. Okay, just a few quick ones. Atomic bonds. This came out recently. Some of the first images they've been able to take of atomic bonds, and you can't get more clear than that. Okay, snowflakes. Doesn't matter what different kind of fractal snowflake, they're all hexagons. You got, here's the very zoomed in image of those snowflakes. Really fantastic, interesting geometries that show up, but perfect hexagons. Okay, and next, crystals, you see it, that was a huge one, but that geometry becomes very clear under those compressed materials. Beehives, another example, okay, where you see that coming together. And it's very interesting, the phonetics, you know, this most great name, Abha, this B and the H, play a very crucial role. And you see it over all these terms, be it black hole, be it heartbeat, be it beehive. It seems to be everywhere, and these hexagons show up. Next, light polarizing is a hexagon. Saturn's North Pole even has it, and I think you could fit about 4 Earths inside that hexagon right there, just to give you an idea of how huge it is, and extremely high velocity gases taking angled turns, and there is no current physical explanation for such a phenomena. This has been going on for 26 years straight since they first filmed it, and I'm sure a lot longer than that. You even see it in the crop circles, all right? So whatever you think about that, it shows up all over the place. Ultimately, what this is demonstrating is the idea of bilateral symmetry, mirror imaging, okay? Perfect example is the human body. When you multiply numbers, they form mirror images, and no one knew this before Marco discovered this. Let me just show you really quick. We'll do this really fast. If you do multiples of 1, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then 10 is 1, 11, 12, 13, 2. 10 is 1, 11 is 2, 12 is 3, and so on. It makes that pattern over and over, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you do multiples of 8, interestingly, and notice any of these two numbers, when you add them together horizontally, they always equal 9. 1 and 8 is 9, 7 and 2 is 9, 4 and 5 is 9. And of course, 3 and 6, if they were there, equal 9. Always one odd, one even. And that can't be underestimated in its significance. But 8 goes same thing backwards. 8 is 16, which is 7, 24, which is 6. You understand where I'm going. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 9. 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. 7 is the exact same thing backwards. 7, 5, 3, 1, 8, 6, 4, 2, 9. Okay? They're forming mirror images. And that's something, it's called spin symmetry, all right? And ultimately, they're making a vortex. This is so important for understanding natural phenomena and how they work. I'll just show you a few examples. Again, the music came right away to me. Any of you who study music, you know that any inversions, they call this a circle of fifths. So if you do a circle of fifths backwards, it's a circle of fourths. Okay, if you invert a second chord, it's a seventh. If you invert a third, it's a sixth. Okay, all musical chords and inversions are based on that 9 axis, and that can be demonstrated very thoroughly. Okay, you see that symmetry obviously in nature. We're all based on an axis, an upright vertical axis. Okay, but obviously if you're looking at me standing on the earth, and I'm talking about those emanations coming out, then my vertical is then that where those emanations are coming out along the earth, allowing me to align upright. And isn't that what distinguishes us as humans? Okay, so you see that as human beings, we are horizontally symmetrical, but we are not vertically symmetrical because we are spin-oriented around an axis. We don't even really have 10 fingers, as Marco is fond of saying. What we have is 0.5, which is half of 100%, and they're mirror images. If you had 10, your thumb would be over here. Okay? Okay, again, coming back to this equation now, you start to see the full picture. All right? We've got the doubling. And this was an animation done by my friend Tom Barnett, and you see some more of his work later on. So there's the doubling. We have halving, and I just want to get to the end of this animation finally and show you how these stages occur, because right here is where you're going to see how this vortex occurs. All right, so you notice we just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's one control. Okay, there's the energy. Here's the field. Now, what's interesting is you could put, they don't just go out in straight lines, they also work around a circle. You can see 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Doesn't matter, but you notice what happens here from this first stage. Remember I said staged activation, discrete pulse moments. From this first stage where you have 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5 on that symbol, when you get to the second one with the 2, notice what happens to the 1. The 1 comes down here, and the 8 comes down here. But if you look at the 4 and 5, which are down here, they just go straight up. And if you look at the 2 and 7 that were here, they just go straight up. And it's not until the next stage where they invert. Okay? So really what's happening on this symbol at each moment as these multiplication tables are firing is it's making a vortex like this. Embedded within the standard multiplication tables that we learned as kids is a vortex. Who would have ever known? And that vortex is literally defining the motion of matter through space and time. All right, we'll continue. Perfect example you can see of that principle happening of inversion is in our own vision, and the way that we take in and process images is working based on that principle. Okay? So this is ultimately the nature of the vortex. All right, the white knight, the Ark of the Covenant, whatever you want to call it. The fastest that you can accelerate any medium, it will make a vortex. And why? Because it's curving around this lattice structure, this linear substrate that exists underneath our physical world of mass, which is defined. Magnetism, which we show by the 3 and 6, is the only thing fast enough to keep up with this energy. It responds to it instantaneously. And electricity then, which is matter in motion, just electrons through a wire, or however you want to look at that, that matter, rapid matter in motion, is then the byproduct. That vortex is occurring because of the pulse and the geometry inherent in that field. All right? So then, again, you can see the vortex. We'll continue. Okay, ultimately this led to the discovery that what we were looking at is a coil, all right? And this was suggested by an engineer over dinner at Denny's. You can't get better than that. Marco tells a story great. I won't go into it because we don't have too much time. But ultimately what he did was he came to this conclusion, and looking at this, he was an engineer. His name was Scott Gosler, and he said it's a coil. What this is modeling is you have a coil and you have an associated magnetic field. Before that, these patterns were there, but it wasn't really understood. I backtracked a little and was explaining things to you, but it wasn't really understood what this was modeling. So this idea that it's a coil suddenly brought the realization that this could be applied to an energy machine, right? And this is a picture of one of the larger fusion projects going on out there, these toroidal coils. So they're already onto this. The thing is, we just have the right pathway to move the material. We'll continue. Okay, so what is another example of a coil? Well, the first one that comes to mind is DNA. All right, DNA. Our body is sometimes referred to by Shakespeare as this mortal coil. And you can see very clearly right here, if you have the 9 here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right? Again, the 3, 9, and 6 are invisible. They're an invisible field. And when Marco actually contacted the experts and the doctors, he found out that they know there is a magnetic field here. They call it the major groove of DNA. They believe it's because DNA is made up of phosphates, which have a negative charge and an associated field. But I don't believe it's coincidental that our numbers describe that field perfectly. Okay? So literally, then you can see that equation popping up inside our own bodies. All right? This is why I make the claim that you can cure or end all diseases using this discovery. That you can literally, because disease is just geometric lattice structures docking up with one another. Okay? This is how replication, all these things occur. So by manipulating and controlling this field to put the DNA in its proper resonant or healthy state, you could literally steer diseases out of the body. And as far out as that sounds, it's kind of like Bones in Star Trek, where you just have the field shot and then you're fine. But I've discussed this with many professionals and many doctors, and they, across the board, have seen the merit of this notion. And I believe that we're starting to look at the beginning of what could be the true way to harness and control the genetics. This was from Marco's original presentation on this. You can see him up there, quantum mechanical state of DNA. And so this was where this was first opened up, and he received a peer review from Dr. Hans Nieper. And I personally met someone who was cured of cancer by Dr. Hans Nieper a few years ago at my restaurant, and he very much supported these findings. Okay, we'll continue. This is from Marco's original book, and you can see them there modeling this field inside the genetics. Sometimes it's called the morphogenetic field. It was proposed by Rupert Sheldrake, and he's done a lot of work on that. And this is the first time mathematically we've ever been able to see that field. It's an inherent information field that's actually controlling the expression of our genetics. Okay? These are further, more detailed, more on the quantum level images, and they're starting to reveal how these vortices show up within the DNA. And we believe this is actually what causes a sister strand unraveling, which allows for duplication to go on in DNA. Okay, so there's not so much junk in the trunk that we thought there was. And actually a good friend of mine, his brother participated in this discovery. I'm sorry, not his brother, his brother-in-law participated in this discovery, which just came out recently, proving that the so-called junk DNA actually contains switches which are activating the part of the DNA that they already understood, which is coding for proteins. Ultimately, so they're only one step away now from understanding that this field is then controlling those genes, which are then controlling the secondary genes, which are the only ones we've been looking at so far. So we see that that whole world is opening up, and that modern science is proving it anyway. There is an inherent syntax to the so-called junk DNA. It abides just like a language. It has that same kind of mathematics behind it. Okay, it's ultimately controlled by flux field. Okay, they say living chromosomes function just like solitonic holographic computers using endogenous DNA laser radiation. So this is just showing that by starting to manipulate these fields, which they're doing through lasers now, that you can actually control the expression of the genetics, not by cutting and splicing, okay, which is very primitive. I had an animation of that, but we'll just skip through that. Okay, so Marco took these ideas, and he ultimately developed what's come to be known as the Roden coil. And this is an early drawing of that. It was a bifiliar coil, like the DNA double strand, that's wrapped around many times, and which ultimately forms this kind of donut shape, which is why they're now calling our film Randy's Donuts, or we have Marco's Donuts up here. It's called a torus, or a toroid. Keep going. It's just some images we'll scroll through of the Roden coil. It's been used. A lot of anomalies discovered in the early experimentation with this. We open sourced it online, and people started building and experimenting and inventing things. People have had weight asymmetries where one part of the coil was heavier than another part. They've had all kinds of things, maintaining charges over days. A lot of strange, anomalous things. Marco actually had some of his initial designs tested by Hewlett-Packard, and they were found to have more than double the efficiency of the standard models. And there's no conventional explanation for why. So whether or not it proves us right, at the end of the day, it proved that all conventional theory is wrong. And that in and of itself, I think, is significant because that's what they're always telling me. Science is only science when you can prove it wrong. So I guess I just proved that they were doing science. So we'll keep going. And you can just see here's some just primitive models of these coils that have been developed. And this is how the toroid was being modeled. That's showing the magnetic field and these fractal arms that came out. And it's mentioning there that this is obsoleting the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, okay? If you're familiar with physics, you know what that is. But it's actually giving a deterministic motion to electricity, okay? When this was taken a little further, what ultimately this led to is this image, which is called the mathematical fingerprint of God. And this involves every equation that you could possibly do, all on one polarized metric in this diamond grain lattice structure that I was referring to before. I'm going to show you some images of what it looks like in nature. This is giving and defining the pathway of motion, how vortexes move, how they flow. And it was done initially on this flat sheet to try and understand how these numbers were operating. You have the different multiplication series all on different axes, and always at an angle, you have doubling. All right? Again, that's from cymatics images, vibrating mediums. You can see that diamond grain lattice structure showing up right there is another good example of it. Okay? Not just making it up again. You see it in nature, you see it in plants. This is from electron I always have the hardest time saying that word, spectroscopy or whatever it is. I don't know why I can't say that word, but anyway, I knew I was going to mess it up before I started. But again, showing that lattice structure very clearly at 500 nanometers. Hey, these are quantum numbers. These are how they exist in discrete spaces and how they can start to be given a value or an amount that's defining our world. Okay, wait, go back one. Oh, you messed up. Oh, man, I messed up my own joke. Go forward again. One more. I don't know. There must have been a slide missing there. Okay, I was going to show this science. Recently, they discovered at this quantum level how reality does dissolve into these grains and this lattice structure on the quantum level. And I had a great statement from a scientist there about it. And I was making a joke. That one goes out to Ruben. That because of that, there's a whole movement of vegan zombies looking for grains. Anyway, it's a bad joke, but I know Ruben's been doing that zombie stuff, so I had to throw it in there. Okay, what these numbers model, once you start looking at it, the beauty of it is you can model all the principles of physics, waveforms, okay? This shows how when these emanations come out, they actually ripple over that surface topology in waves of 9, showing how information can be transmitted and communicated. Let's keep going. There's the quote there. Okay, so here's where they're talking about space-time stops behaving like a smooth continuum Einstein described, instead dissolves into grains, just like a newspaper photograph dissolves into dots as you zoom in. So it's showing that that lattice structure is absolutely there, okay? And the scientist who was there, the director of Fermilab, Craig Hogan, said, the result is, if it's what I expect it is, then we're all living in a giant cosmic hologram. And that's what these numbers are, a perfect hologram. And here you can see some of the images from Marco's original book where you start to scale these numbers. You can scale them up and down to infinity, and the pattern never breaks. Here's another one showing scaled out further. Still, even scaled out here, 1, 2, you can't see it clearly, but 4, 8. All right, that doubling sequence is still there. It exists on all levels, and this is really significant when you start looking at computing with this and what you can do with it. What he theorized about it then is that ultimately it must form into this shape, which he called the sunflower hologram toroid map, okay? It starts making that donut shape. And in these early images, we didn't have any 3D. It was just filled in and discussed and theorized about. And this was kind of where the work was at when I came to it. Keep going. Some more images of that torus and how Marco's ideas about it developed. Again, showing that primal point of unity in those vortices over top. This gets into where I came into the work, which is what's called underpinning nested vortices. They're vortices that occur over the surface topology. And I became really interested in them, and it was by learning how to calculate this that I actually proposed a whole new solution to these toroids and how they worked. Again, here's showing those linear emanations, how they're intersecting at unique, distinct places, separated, and I was actually able to determine how these function in groups and what they're doing and the more complex side of the math, but it shows how then you still get that spiral at an angle. All right? Again, that's taking the numbers away, and you can see that spiral forming along those straight lines. So I became really into this. I'm just showing you a few images. Again, I want to keep moving for time's sake. This is showing the number groups. I didn't get into all that, but that's okay. Just showing some of the patterns that showed up. And as I started to study this more and more, though, I realized that there was something that wasn't right about our understanding at the time. And so this is where the math, for me, started to evolve a little bit. Continue. We'll continue. Here again, showing those vortices occurring. So I started to work on how to calculate those, which is ultimately how I found the secret to this. All right, these vortices are like dimples on a golf ball. It used to be the golf balls were smooth, and they found that when you dimpled them like this, it created vortices that controlled the flight characteristics and the properties of it. Okay, so this is how it starts relating to flight technologies. Planes are using these kind of things now. They've invented planes with wobbly wings, or they use certain dimplings to create those kind of vortices now on some of the modern planes. Okay, when I started working on these sequences, I discovered that there was a whole new pattern to this math that had never been understood before. We don't have time to get into all that now, but that's how we ultimately started to develop another 3D model for this torus and to be able to apply it. Okay, just showing you more images of those vortices and the spirals they make. Very complex relationships that occur here and very significant. Okay, this was one of the first 3D models that actually proved that my calculations were correct. I don't have it where you can look at it from all angles, but this showed that these numbers were taking the pathways that I considered and that there were actually multiple circuits interacting. And then I started to gather information on how this was working in science. So again, just more images. I'm showing you scaled toruses, how you can make bigger and smaller ones that go up and down. I believe that ultimately this is the shape of the universe. It's a black hole to a white hole. It compresses and decompresses, implodes and explodes. Okay, this is the shape that we see scaled on all levels of creation. Okay, we'll continue going. Well, let's see. Let's go back there. Can you pull up that top video there? Just click the link there if you go full screen. Yeah. Well, no, that's not it. I tell you what, just skip it. Just go back down to the image. Just click right here. Yeah, there you go. All right, let's just skip ahead. And keep going. All right, ultimately what I found, you remember my whole original thing was trying to connect these two shapes, that caduceus, that DNA shape, which had already been found, and then this torus shape, which now I had discovered. Here you can see actually images I pulled from a medical journal showing how DNA takes the shape of a torus, and they were actually able to image that and show how it was functioning. So again, it plays into our own bodies. Continue. You can see the blood cells are in the shape of a torus. Okay, sunflowers are in the shape of a torus. Keep going. All right, you can see this through plants. Continue. Even dolphins use their sonars to create this. They call it the mystery of the silver rings, and it is being studied now among scientists. They know that dolphins are actually using what they call nonlinear mathematics, the same as this, to create this. We'll continue. Keep going. You can see it in hurricanes, tornadoes. Our Earth's magnetic field is a torus. All right? The galaxies are all toroidal in nature, most of the ones that we observe. There you can see that. Same compressing, decompressing system. It's a drive. It's an energy wheel. All right? We'll just flash through these. These were patterns I found that show that the pentagon overlaces this, and you can see that occurring in flowers and a lot of organic shapes. Continue. Keep going. This gets into the more complex side of the math. When I was able to make these models, I determined how these pathways were flowing, and interestingly, I then found that exact same shape on the astronomical level, where you can really see how that's working. And we'll continue. So ultimately, these were created into a coil, which some people call the Powell coil, or a lot of people refer to as the Abha coil. And this is where we really started to get into the energy applications. These are just some very primitive models that were developed for people who have seen my TED Talk. They've done things like spinning a magnet with no power for minutes at a time. You can keep continuing. And ultimately, it's been developed more, what we're going to be showing in our film, the work done by Daniel Nunez. Here's just some more models of that. Keep going. And this is ultimately what you can see is the outcome of that mathematics. So I know I'm running out of time here. Essentially, where this has come to now is that we are producing working devices that have hundreds of times over unity. For those of you who don't know what over unity is, that means that you're getting hundreds of times more energy out of it than what you're putting into it. By all standard conventional definitions, you can kind of flip through the images as I finish real quick. By all standard conventional definitions, that coil should be nothing more than an extension cord. You can look up lots of videos from Daniel Nunez that are online demonstrating these, and they're defying all the laws of electrical engineering and physics. So we have proof of concept now. We believe that we can turn this into a real working technology. That's ultimately, just keep going, explaining this torch. It's a heat sink, okay? It's controlling temperature regulation. We can get into supercomputing with it. Okay, we have peer review from some of the top people. Russell Blake, Marco will tell you a lot about that. And again, it goes on in terms of the applications, and that's sort of where it stands now. At a very primitive level with home-built Radio Shack stuff, you can power up, you can light your room with a tiny battery. All right, and that's just the beginning. I've never really been able to oversee a project personally because we just haven't had the funding in place to do that. This is just showing some more images of the complexities of the math, what it gets into when you start looking at computing. You just keep flipping through them. But it's a real thing. These numbers really exist. The numbers really are there, and everything that we're doing is evidence of the fact that this theory is absolutely true. That it really is the secret, not only behind supercomputing and all that, but behind magnetic refrigeration, which is at the cutting edge of technology now. It's being demonstrated. These heat sinks are being implemented in computers, on and on and on. That ultimately this is the flying saucer. It's the philosopher's stone, or the ultimate technology. It's a source of acoustic levitation, which I have images in here too, showing where that's been done. It's being proven now that twisted vortices of light have the fastest computing power ever found, 2.5 terabits per second. Okay, huge. And there's images showing that exact toroidal shape. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude there and let Marco come up and talk. I appreciate your time and attention, and hope, again, that magnetic geometry showing that right there, those shapes of magnetic fields. So I appreciate all your attention, and I hope that you were able to grasp that concept well. And now it's really up to everybody to spread the word and to make this grow into a real thing. We're again, open sourcing all the information, so you can look this stuff up online. You can find out how to build these things. You can find out what the inventors are doing, and it's very simple and it's easy to do. And the more of us that do it and communicate about it, the more we'll take it to that next level. So I appreciate your time and attention. And without further ado, Marco Rodin, the founder of Vortex-Based Mathematics. I like to call him my teacher, and it's been an honor for me to learn from him and work, and I'm going to turn it over to him now.
Randy, it was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. I enjoyed the imagery at the end most of all, but thank you. I'm going to try and talk real fast. Tyler's going to help me with the videos, and I'm going to try and cut through it because I know it's late. Can you hear me okay? Great. Okay. What can I tell you? I come from Marina Del Rey, except I used to have a bus with dogs in Venice and a pregnant wife in it. True story. And we had tennis clubs. They used to be on Highway 90 right here. And Maxella was where our office was, and it grew and became the biggest tennis clubs in the United States as far as membership, with 15,000 members. My dad's business, he loved tennis. Anyway, so I've been in Hawaii for 16 years, moved back about 4 years ago. And okay, so Tyler, are you ready? If you type in rodent coil or rodent math under images or on Google, there tends to be, or just type in rodent coil on YouTube, at any given instance there's $5,000 grassroots, and 5,000 videos done by backyard grassroots inventors. All based on a schematic I did 20 years ago. Tonight's not, it just can't give me the time I need to explain how to make them more powerful and more stronger, but even the very crude ones, which was just done under 100 feet of copper, was doing more power than a very powerful motor or generator. So Tyler, where are we right now? Give me a yell. Okay. So it kind of, it snowballed. If you type in Marco Rodin, my name, on Google, it's controversial, it's confusing, especially when you combine religious and mysticism together with science and mathematics. And it deserves a better professional presentation. That's why Randy's making a movie. That's why I want to do a proper animation explaining how it works. Essentially what the discovery is that numbers have dimension. They're dimensional, which is a very big discovery. And I'm going to pull up some references from the director of future operating systems from Microsoft, who devoted his life and came to my home and has contributed hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation and a patent. But I'm going to cut through it as fast as I can. I'm just going to show it and cut through it. I don't have much of a website. It's just my name, marcorodin.com. Hopefully someday I'll put all these references and information up on it. So I'm going to show some videos, some applications real quick. Tyler's been doing this for a long time with me. He just flew in and he's kind of caught something and he's not feeling good, but he's trying his best to help me. If I had had what I wanted to show, I would have shown scaling. I would have showed magnification from micro to macro. Yeah, that's the nature of this discovery, when you take it and you show it on a surface topology. See, what has happened is branches of math that normally are unrelated, and of course, as it relates to chemistry and microbiology and physics and astrophysics, branches like surface topology, matrix algebra, arithmetic, even calculus, it's all been converged together into a single relationship. And essentially, numbers aren't ever alone. There's a number in front of them, up, down, right, left, front, back. They piece together like a mosaic, a jigsaw puzzle. They're like the cosmic egg that was shattered and strewn about, and we see it as pieces. Why 6 billion people on this planet didn't have the discovery, and why I made it, is because it's not that everybody is ignorant. It's because of the fact that I'm doing essentially what everybody is doing, exactly the opposite of reverse. Instead of, I bought this shirt tonight. When I bought it, I paid, and she added up the other clothes and gave me back the change. What was held stationary was the function, be it multiplication or addition. But what was moved was the numbers around. That's what we're used to doing, moving numbers around. What I did, which is exactly the reverse 180, is I discovered that numbers don't move, that they're stationary vector interstices, that they're nodes. Now, as Randy prefaces, I'm saying too, my work's based upon a lot of contributors, a lot of different people. And my terminology and my language, we're all kind of like in the same boat together, sharing and trying to understand and describe what this is, and that's what people do. When the more advanced they are, the more specialized they are, the more expertise they are, the more then they realize that this opens up a whole new avenue for greater accomplishment, because they've exhausted the existing tools that our present-day society offers, the present state of the art mathematics. So essentially, it just opens up another paradigm because no civilization is ever more advanced than the level of its mathematics. And so the mathematics today, essentially by taking the decimal system and showing that 396 is a separate system helically woven around the 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, and separating them, you can get rid of irrational numbers. You can solve pi as a whole number. You can essentially, if Tyler's ready, I'll begin. So that's the Lorentz butterfly. You can see the hole. This is called a tor, or a vortex. You recognize that VW symbol that had that lazy 8, and then it had that. It was a vector because while it looked like a triangle, there was no base. Oops. 3 and 6 can never connect on the base. That's the secret. But what I have discovered is that the arithmetic, that the numbers we count in the base 10 system are the Lorentz attractor. It's a hardcore statement. Let's just cut through it. Let's keep going. These are called underpinning nested vortices is an artist's rendition, but it's real significant because holes, fissures, everything's porous, whether we see those holes or not. It's called manifolds, but I'm just cutting through it I don't want to dwell on it. That was DNA. Randy touched on it. Major groove, minor groove, deflected. In other words, intelligent design is life is not based upon random chance, haphazard, trial and error. That information is preserved in these flux fields. DNA is made out of phosphates. All chemists know that, and phosphates are known to always have a negative electric charge. And of course, with any negative electric charge, there's always an associated magnetic field, which is displacing the DNA, because as you know, nature abhors a vacuum. But essentially, it was always conjectured by our ancestors. It's called a bioetheric template, bioetheric, what else? Morphogenic field. Anyway, it does exist, and you can even see the funny VW, 3 and 6, the 9, the 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. Okay, we'll keep going. It's weird. He showed that, but I published it many years ago. I'll just keep going. It's too hard to see the number map, but we'll just keep going. These are images. These are the emanations, and they're creating numbers. Numbers are created on the z-axis perpendicular. That's the discovery. I call it the dandelion principle. Go ahead. That was, I even designed that logo with other artists. You can see where the 3, the 9 is the hole up in the top, the 6 would be, and the lazy 8, there's the X, the Baha'i, the Day of God. I designed the artwork for a t-shirt for my religion. Okay, let's keep going. So there's a z-axis. Everything's created from the inside out, which causes things to invert. My hands are a mirror. The base 10 has nothing to do with 10 fingers because I can hide one hand behind the other. As you half, you increase a 0. This is 5/10, 25/100, 125,000, 625 10,000s, 3,125 100,000s. Powers of 10 are split. It's called a combinatorial explosion, geometric progression, which is the opposite. Reciprocal is 2n, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. But what I do is I compress infinity down to 6 numbers, 6 discrete, simple numbers. It's called decimal parity in computer science. It is respectable, but it looks like numerology. So 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, the 7 and 5 come after the 8, not before. So let's keep going, but it's created on the z-axis. All these numbers, all the multiplications, you can't see it, that the axis is our multiplication series, so I'll just have to resign myself to that you can't. He's trying, but keep going. Everything's created from the inside out. That's my logo, times, divide, plus and minus in a circle. Tyler, you're doing great work for a guy that doesn't feel good. Next, okay. So we're done with that folder then. Let's just go right to the next one. We'll go to videos. And you can take them in any order. You start at the top. Do the reverse. Okay. Here it goes. The document did not open. 3D Hoff. It was a FLV. That's right. Open with. Good luck. Yeah. You need VLC to open it. Okay, so it isn't going to happen. We'll skip it. But those of you who are interested, as I've talked over the last few weeks about an animation of the torus with the numbers, that actually showed it, with the inverting from the inside out. This is showing lighting. I haven't even watched this video yet. It's only a couple days old, maybe a week old. This is Daniel. There is an audio track. Do we have a way of hearing it? Anyway, max it. More. Okay, well, maybe there. Okay. So I guess, anyway, he's claiming now roughly 500%, I think it was 450% more output than in, which is, you know, like perpetual motion. It's called over unity or zero-point energy. I'm only going to go through this video for a second. I'm going to stop. Let's keep going. Go right to the next video. There'll be more. John specifically asked for applications and uses. This machine actually is sitting back there on the table. This is in Spanish. This bar right here, this is a motor. This motor spins faster than the hard drive in your laptop. It's about to go to 20,000 RPM. What's significant about this motor, I want to hear it, even if we can't understand it. I'll try and talk loud, because I want you to hear the speed, how loud, and all the noise is coming just from a round cylinder spinning. There's no blades, there's no turbines. It's just that bar and that. This is a Hall sensor. There's no brushes, no commutator. This is only under 100 feet of copper right here, okay? The most expensive part of any motor is copper. This essentially gets rid of the copper, okay? Normally, to get this speed, it would normally take maybe 30, 40,000 feet of copper. Here is no iron core. I don't need them, so I get rid of the weight. Bear in mind, when I say I mean all my colleagues who've collaborated together on this project. 17,000 RPM. You don't see anything moving. The noise is just that bar spinning. No, it's suspended in a magnetic field. No brushes, no commutator. It's the tip of the iceberg. I could probably show you 100 more videos completely different. Why is this working? Because this winding pattern focuses the magnetic field at the center. Essentially, my discovery, no holds barred, is that I found the missing energy in the universe. Call it dark matter, inertia, ether, prana, chi, tachyon, spirit. This energy comes from the center of mass out. And it's linear. It doesn't bend from the moment that it, until I can see it the moment it penetrates the surface of the torus. After that, I can't see it as it goes out. Let's keep going, I guess. Let's go to another video. Oh, this is fun. We'll definitely need audio. This is people making a speaker without diaphragm, because I wanted to show you some of the intriguing things that people do. That's showing how it's made. Okay. All that sound's coming with diaphragm. You think it's dubbed on. It's coming out of the donut. In the next video, I'm going to show how the sound comes out. So again, that's not dubbed on. I never even met the person who made that video. That's up on YouTube under Better Roden Speaker. Okay, so it's a diaphragmless speaker. Okay, so where's the sound coming from? It's coming from the copper itself, because this winding pattern, by only magnetism can give slippage and free play fast enough. Only magnetism can occur simultaneously to this new emanation, which you can call it spirit or the dark matter, because when spirit emanates, it creates negative draft counter space, and the magnetic field goes in the opposite direction. And that's why I get so much magnetism. I'm not really harnessing the spirit. I'm harnessing the magnetic field by this winding to get the magnetic field by tapping into the emanation in the center. Everything's focused. Everything's like a mirror, that winding. Now this is showing where the sound comes from. Watch where the bass, as soon as the bass comes in, it's the copper. The copper itself, all the sound is coming from. Watch what happens to the bass. It explodes the copper. There's no diaphragm. There's many examples of that, but I like that one because, again, I just pulled it off YouTube. I didn't do any of these. These are all people that took the blueprint, the schematic, and made it independently. Essentially, it went viral. This is Daniel again, who we just saw. Daniel's doing great. So it's the sounds coming out of the windings. Who knows who that is singing? I think that's everybody's favorite. As well as the light. Okay, I'm not going to dwell. I'm going to keep going. Okay, what, do we have any more? Oh, these are fun. Oh, let's make this big. Watch this. Again, under 100 feet of wire, less power than a single AAA battery. I'm pacing all over the place. I'm sorry. Reverse it and start the audio again. Again, and not only is it working, but it's smashed and it works.
It actually came off of one of the yellow Torres I built standard 36.
You'll see a sense for the power. He's about to pick up a 1-inch. I wish I had one with me. I keep forgetting to get one. A 1-inch neodymium N42 64-gram ball. It's this big.
And then I decided just to mash the windings flat and then see what this thing would look like.
That's my favorite part.
Kind of get an idea. It's used to be a Rodin coil, or somewhat kind of is. Here's my neo ball. The coil's already energized. Let's see, let me get my thing hooked up here. I'll show you what the
Conventional science, this would not
right
work.
now we've got 2.38, 2.39 volts, and on my ammeter here we got 1.53 amps. All right, I'm gonna put my neo ball in here.
That means it's under 5 watts.
You see it, get it to start spinning. It levitates in there quite nicely. I can move it around, you know, it raise the dangle a little bit.
Blows me away too.
Seems to be pretty decent, pretty strong. Some good torque in there. But
He who harnesses magnetism controls the universe.
doesn't really look like much like a Rodin configuration, but it does, you know, able to get a spinning ball in here. So
The fastest that the ball reportedly has gotten up to now is 500,000 RPM with people getting hurt, with the materials disintegrating, because they're not made to go that fast. Typically, I've always insisted everybody have a safety plastic shield of some sort, but not everybody listens. Okay. And that's Dan. I haven't seen this one. This is brand new. That's the one I meant that's brand new. So here goes. He's claiming 450 overpower. A little louder.
September 26th of 2012. What I would like to present today
It's new to me
is
too.
a clear indication of over-unity in both measurement of input wattage and output wattage from the unification coil rewired. So this is some of the best progress we've seen to date with this technology, and I would like to share that with you today. So if you have any comments, questions, or feedback at the end, feel free to post in the comments section below. As always, thank you for your support, and blessings.
They call it ringing. When it harmonically, I mean, they turn them off and they stay on, is what happens, because it keeps on reinforcing itself. Because every little part of it is like a facet aimed at the center, which is the axis. And the axis is essentially where the emanations come from. It's going to be real technical, so I'll leave it on for 15 more seconds. I don't know what's ahead of me. He's lighting all those lights.
Over here.
Because I really don't want to be technical. But
Lights turn on.
essentially,
And now
though,
the
he would
amplifier's
cut
load wattage is
Just
34
Cause
watts.
Entertainment Studios electrical bill
We had an increase
based on
of
this
13
to
watts.
0.
So that 13 watts should match the input meters. So we have 58.1 watts, 58.1 volts. Right here is 57.8. And 255 milliamps.
It's technical. I can't even follow it.
So that leaves us with somewhere around 14 watts.
Type in ABHA, ABHA coil on YouTube. He'll be the first one. Go to his channel, Daniel Newman, and hit play videos, and you'll see every one of them. And there's, I don't know, 50 videos.
8 milliamps.
This is the most recent one. I'm going to halt it here because it's technical. Let's go to the next one.
What's good to note is that the
Okay. So we're done with the videos for the moment. If you go online and you type in my name, there's going to people, they're going to say a lot of harsh things about me. I don't know that many because I don't really read it. I don't have the time. But that's because I've never done a good presentation showing. This is the patent from the Director of Future Operating Systems of Microsoft, Russell Blake, based 100% on my work. Skip it and keep on, well, scan through it for 1 second. It's very hard to understand. Essentially, numbers have dimensionality. That is the secret of artificial intelligence. Okay, I'm going to skip it and move to the next. These are all from Blake. So just take it in any order. No, on Blake. Stay on Blake. But yeah, you're doing right, Tyler. Just give me whatever's there. Now, the reason I'm showing you this, because it's, in a sense, it's technical, because it's just as technical as the other thing. But how many people get endorsements like this? This is, normally I don't show this one, because this is a real old one. Thank you, Tyler. He's making it bigger for us. I still need a little bit bigger. Okay. Essentially, he's saying, I didn't even remember a laser pointer. It became clear that he meant me. Oh, I had, this is a more recent endorsement. This was the second one, 2001. It's still old. It became clear to me that Mr. Rodin's work was a synthesis of numerical patterns which had been previously overlooked by conventional science and mathematics. In hopes of bridging the gap, what he did is he said he wanted to be the go-between between me and mankind to conventional mathematics so they could understand what I did because it's foreign. And so he said he created the math, I put forth an analytical framework in which the mathematical formulae generate the numerical patterns of the Rodin torus. These formulae suggested that the Rodin torus lies not just on the surface of the donut shape, it's really called a torus or toroid in science, but into the interior as well. In other words, the Rodin torus is three-dimensional. That's impossible by everything known today. Okay? He says through here that I have the most coherence, the most regularity ever done in math. Essentially, I have found perfection, that numbers are real, okay, and they're a part of physics, a part of nuclear emanations. So anyway, he gives a letter, it goes on. He says in the 70s he discovered atomic modeling which revolutionized computer forms, blah, 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 blah. He says he revolutionized code size, blah, blah, blah. He says he mentions that just to mention that he has an intuition and a history of success and practical application of mathematics. Now I'm completely convinced that the Rodin torus will likewise lead to new and revolutionary advances in art and science. That's a very big endorsement, okay? Senior researcher, Microsoft. Let's keep going because there's more by him. So that's why I don't read what they say on the internet, because it's not their fault. In fact, most people think that you can count in 10 fingers, and that's why we count the base 10, and it's arbitrary. I don't want to get too technical, and this is an older letter. It's been a genuine pleasure working with me. I believe you have discovered a unique pattern in decimal number system that was not previously known to mankind. We'll stop there. Nobody can claim something, certainly not that I know, something new and original in math that never existed before. And I can't make that assertion because I have no degrees. I did this work when I was 17. I'm 57 now. So his endorsement is acceptable. Let's go to his resume, which might be below it. Yeah, go ahead. So here's his resume. He gave me his reputation and put it on the line for me. Who could ever get something like this? Because he believed in the discovery. You know, in my hands, he said, here's my resume to back up his letters. He is Microsoft Corporation, senior researcher, advanced technology, developed performance tools for optimization, U.S. patent pending. No, I like it big, even if it goes off the side. He was systems performance manager, advanced operating systems with Microsoft. You don't go any harder or more complicated than that, okay? Before, Sun Microsystems, so that was in 96, now we're at 88. Director of Operations, Software Products Division, architect and creative department to handle blah, 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 work with AT to develop a unified version of Unix. Here we are, 87, Adaptive Intelligence Corp, Vice President Engineering, Managed Software, Electrical and Mechanical Engineering, complete construction of high, blah, 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 blah. Let's go over here. It doesn't really matter, Tyler. It's easier, just keep it. Solaris Corporation, Tandem Computers, Inc., Hewlett-Packard. Degree is in computer science, 1972. I don't know anybody who got one that far back in computer science. The man is brilliant. Devoted his life to this discovery. The patent and everything he's doing is 100% identical verbatim. In other words, it's a perfect replication of what I taught him. Okay? And then he translated it from those numbers now, it's going into a matrix algebra. It's going into a whole nother language. And it goes and goes and goes and goes. The patent that you just saw was completely looking visually different because it's being put under the radar. This is the end. My favorite part is, wait, go back to it for 1 second. Go to page, I don't know, a page like 80-ish. I hope you don't mind that I'm dwelling on this. By the way, he took 3 classes from me, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe Thursday, I can't remember. It's all signed. I had him sign and document that, all the instruction, artwork, all the tablets, all the pages to document. Hold it right there. Go a little bit lower. Let's see. Keep going. Oh, let's go back. Let's go back. I haven't shown where he addresses the potentials and applications. Keep going. And then he wrote this in 1 day. This is the kind of brain, when you're good, you're good. Hold it. right there. Okay, he started in the morning. He missed his last day of class in the week, and he says, I'm writing the paper on it, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't believe it. He was done that afternoon. Keep on going down. Wait. Higher. I don't know where we're at. Go. Oh, no, we're way too far. Forget it. Drop it. We can't find it. Essentially, he says that it has the most coherence. He says this is no small amount of irregularity. He's never seen anything like this, because every number is intersecting at every point with every other number, and it's passing waves of motion, of vibration, because I'm moving the energy through the numbers. Let's forget it. I don't have the patience. Let's go to the next thing. Again, I'm only pulling this up because it cites that what I'm telling you is credible. This is a German Journal of Oncology asking to publish my work on DNA, which I published in San Mateo, which was the biggest genetic engineering conference in the world, asking to publish my work on DNA. Essentially, it's what we already told you, that evolution, Darwinism is false, that there's actually an invisible hand guiding life. There's an all-coherent intelligence. Thanks. Thank you, I appreciate that. Because a high school teacher that refused to teach a school board required him to teach an alternative to evolution, and he refused, quit, sued the school, and the whole board got fired because the judge said that it was not appropriate material for school. I feel sorry for the school board. Okay, this is what we were looking at with Randy, with the numbers shifting and that symbol. This is a completely different world of 396. Okay, I've been talking fast, I'm slowing down. It turns out there's no such thing as male and female. There's no such thing as black and white. There's no such thing as a duality. There's no such thing as polar opposites. Boy, it's beautiful. It turns out that the minimum, because everything has an invisible source that causes the splitting. It's spirit that causes the bifurcation, that causes the doubling. So what happens is that the yin and yang, which we all embrace for representing polarity, opposites, is 3 and 6. It's magnetic. 3 is a magnetic, 6 is magnetic. 9 is the flux, or the spirit, the emanation. 3 and 6 are always opposite polarity. When 9's positive, 3 and 6 are both negative. When 9's negative, 3 and 6 are both positive. I actually like that it's going fast now, because I'm a little hyper tonight, so it's relaxing. 3 doubled is 6. It's the yin and yang. 6 doubled is 12, but 1 plus 2 is 3. 12 doubled is 24, which is 6. 24 is 48, which is 12, which is 3. 48 doubled is 96, which is 15. 6. They can only be one or the other, back and forth, oscillating. What we don't see in the yin and yang is the 9, which is the axis. It never changes. It's invisible. 9, 18, 27, 36. It always equals 9. 45, 54, 63, 72, 81, 90. And that S curve in the yin and yang is a number. It's called a boundary condition, a shear. And there's a lot to be said on it, but I'm not going to beleaguer it. 1 and 8, Randy showed you, was mirrors. Those 2 points horizontally line up. But to get, and you know it was multiples of 1 going up, plus 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9. This is minus 8, or minus 1. 2 8s is 16, 7, 3 8s is 24, 6, 4 8s is 32 is 5, 8, 5, 4, 3, 2, 8, 8, 7, 5, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Because it's reduction, casting out 9s. They're mirrors, starting from the inside out. 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. 7, 5, 3, 1, 8, 6, 4, 2, 9. Because 2 7s, 14 is 5, 3 7s is 21 is 3. All the multiplication series took 23 years. I put together a team of scientists. Now, I'm not showing the illustration here. X, Y, and Z. It turns out that this is a non-Cartesian. This is a legend. It's a blueprint. It's a schematic for a non-Cartesian coordinate system that maps the underpinning geometry of the universe. It maps 3D space. It's a big claim, and it's true. Let's keep going. Oh, but wait. So 1 and 8 are not 2 apart. They line up horizontally, but they're 3 apart. If you go this way, 1, 2, 3 steps. That way, 1, 2, 3. 2 and 7 are 3 away. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. To line up to be a mirror horizontally, male, female, everything is really 3 steps, not 2. It's an optical illusion that it's a duality. Okay, let's keep going. There, Jason said, prime squared, the creation equation, if I'm getting to what I'm thinking is, it's pretty heavy duty. And I wouldn't blame you for not knowing anything I'm saying. This we've already talked about. It was just your control, multiples of 1. We could have said it was multiples of 8, because 2 8s is 16 is 7, 3 8s is 24 is 6, 4 8s is 32 is 5, because 0 is not on a circle. It's the hole in the middle. It's the torr. That's why they say the secret of the donut is the hole. So it's a vortex. It's based on compression, decompression. Because everything doesn't go through the hole, it defines the hole by going around the lip, because it's an aperture. If you don't have the hole in the center, the system doesn't flow. You have shutdown because it has to be a one-way street. If you don't have that positive one-way, like a ratchet flow, if the hole it doesn't exist because it's a thermal system. This whole thing is a refrigeration system. I know it's hardcore. What are you doing? You're cycling? So now we're doing 5. 5. Stop on one of them, though, Tyler. Let's do multiples of 2 and 7. 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, or 7 multiples of 7. 7, 14 is 5, 3, 7 is 21 is 3, 4, 7 is 28 is 1, 7 times 5 is 35 is 8, 42 is 6, 49 is 4, 56, 11 is 2, 63 is 9, 70 is 7, 77 is 14 is 5. In other words, because it's a circle, because there's no 0 on a circle, if there was, it would deflect everything, it would displace, and your calculations would be wrong, because 0 is not in any multiplication series, it's not a number, any number line, and that's why it goes 360 at the top, because 360 divided by 40 is 9, and then it goes to 1. There's no 0 in between it, there's no radiant, because a number cannot be created or destroyed, just like mass to energy, energy to mass. So stop here for 1 second, but what matters is this. Even now we're doing multiples of 5 and 4, 4, 8, 12, 16. What matters is the doubling circuit. This, like brand on a horse's hide, okay? This imprint, this icon, this archetypal symbol never changes in all the multiplication series. That's very significant. And this becomes a shear, which I'm not sure if I can explain. So you can let them cycle for a second, Tyler, since you gave me all the effort to do it. Okay? Because there's really 3 toruses. This is really primes, because it turns out, although primes are such a popular topic, this actually resolves and puts it into a bow, ties it up with a bow, the secret of primes and how they work. Because it turns out that base 10, I said I was going to talk about bases, is because it's the first true prime 3 squared, because 1 and 2 don't even exist, because the minimum part of anything, I already said, based on 3D space is 3. Emanation, simultaneous dual response, negative draft counter space. So what happens is you can't see the numbers, you can't see the toruses, but this is the base 10. It turns out then there is no binary code based on a base or even hexadecimal. It turns out that you already saw the binary code is the base 10. Okay, that 3 and 6 is the result. Every coil has a field. So the next base system, so this is actually an important document. It's too hard to see. You're doing really good for me though, Tyler. So here's the torus. Where's the shear come from? 1 and 7 is 7, 5 times 5 is 27. These lines, these numbers, turn into a hidden grain that explains, just like a wood table or inside a plant, or how things have a hidden flow pathway, a hidden vernacular or reticulation system, how everything moves. I know it's pretty hardcore. It's called world boundary conditions. And I use this to get rid of friction and electricity, because I call it electrical shear, because I'm able to insulate it just by knowing where it wants to go naturally, electricity. Instead of having to do like they do with the cyclotron, getting a correcting magnet and doing cryogenics, energy can be used without forcing it, just by knowing the pathway it wants to take naturally. Let's go to the next illustration. About, I would say, like 75% done, I think. Well, I hope. The next base after base 10 of 3 squared is the base 26 mod 25. 5 times 5 is squared. That's mod 25. That means there's no base 15, no base 12. It doesn't work. It has aberrations. A base system must be perfect. It can have no anomalies. It cannot have any redundancies. It cannot have no omissions. And so this is the original work done by Farron Thorpe at my house, showing, Professor Thorpe, showing the secret of the shears. And this is now the gap space where the flux and the magnetism is. And it's only 1 tile wide, but now there's 4 circuits, in my estimation. We all have different perspectives, because it's an open, Wild West. It's a free-for-all. Anyone, because no one knows exactly what I found. Nobody knows what this is. Okay, nobody knows. They've never even dreamed in their wildest lives that numbers made geometric shapes, 3D objects. So there's where the emanation's coming from in the symbol. Okay, oh, so we're in the article. I like this article. I had a dear friend, he's not alive anymore. He was very unhappy, and I hope he's helping us all from another world now. These were glass toroids. These were made by Robert Hutchings. Let's keep going. Numbers. I just love the illustrations done by Brad. I love all these, showing the emanations. Again, those we talked about, but it's pretty tedious. That's fine. This was Tesla Tech, Steve Ellsworth, Extraordinary Science Conference. This was an article I did a few years ago. Keep going. But wait, it is cute though. See, he puts, come down. No, other way. Oh well. Right, I like how he does 0, 0. It's off from the inside out. Okay, keep going. There was the multiplication series. Everything's from the inside out as we talked. Keep going. The coils, how they're made. Very little copper, nothing inside them, just an air core. And I don't want to make them out of copper. I want to make them out of an ion gas, a plasma, to replicate the Earth's ionospheres. And I think I can make a spaceship with all that. Because when they made the coil, there's the emanations. Okay, we'll keep going. It's compression, decompression, implosion, explosion. That's fine. That's when it's turned on. And that's very significant. And again, that is an endorsement. That was coil, that picture was taken by Jean-Louis Naudin in JLN Labs, which is in France. And he's completely the most respected. I also got a letter in here. I don't think I'm pulling it up. Tom Bearden, Colonel Tom Bearden, saying that I've accomplished everything he's been advocating. These are real famous names. And essentially he said, to get this Fern pattern, this fractal pattern, is impossible using conventional electricity and coils at the power consumption that this is. To get that hole, that torr, because that's a nozzle, okay? That's what you need to go anywhere in the universe. Dennis Watts, who was in charge of the, for NASA, the International Space Station, communications from Boeing, said that this discovery makes mankind intergalactic citizens. We can go anywhere in the universe. Let's keep going. So essentially we become, God help the rest of the universe, the curators or the custodians of the universe. You saw those type of experiments, okay? Keep on going, Tyler. You're doing great. I want to, this is the work on DNA with numbers. Jonas Salk called me up on that kindly. I had shared it with Kenneth Clivington at Salk Institute, his head of research, and he said he thought my work was so advanced on DNA, he said he didn't think it would ever be understood unless I cloned myself. That red is the morphogenic field or the bioetheric tent. Well, it was very kind of him. He's not alive anymore. These are underpinning nested vortices. They're really critical. I'm not explaining them. We'll keep on going. How you have to have vortices within vortices, and based on how they're, what is important is that they're staggered. We'll keep going. Those were claims I made a long time ago that they finally discovered some of them like that. There is a preferred frame of reference. So numbers even are, that symbol is a vector. There's an up, down, right, left, front, back. It has preferred frame of reference. It has spatial orientation. Is that it? No, Brad did that. So that's how numbers are created. If I had had the video presentation that I wanted, I've talked with John. John is our host tonight. I wanted to do, I wanted to show motion over the surface. Oh, come right back. I wanted to show scaling from micro to macro. I wanted to show other base systems and how they work, and how the whole system just ad infinitum is one system. But I don't have those animations at this time. Okay, so we'll keep going. And yeah, thank you. Okay, keep going. And where are we at? So we're done? Tyler? Is there anything we missed? That looks like it is it. So I'll make a closing statement. So, so the work should stand independently of me. It should be able to stand on its own, because it's a language that anybody should be able to verify or replicate by themselves. And so I've just been trying to compile it and preserve it so that when I'm gone, then other people can make a whole different paradigm of technology. I believe it gets rid of the combustion engine. I believe it gets rid of nuclear. On the other hand, it's just this application with so much less copper and getting rid of the weight by getting rid of the iron core, getting the much greater output would solve the energy crisis today. I'll mention, just because of the direness of the moment that we live in, the South Pole this year, the Arctic, melted the most in recorded history, human history. And the other pole is more ice, colder, but they say that it's actually still warming. They say what's going to happen is within the time that once it starts melting, it's actually going to accelerate much faster than the one we just saw. And then, so, we're leaving our planet when we go completely different than how we started. So I can't say how much of it is a part of nature and man's contribution as well, but this energy, just the energy you could realize and tap into this alone could solve the problem, because we essentially, if you have unlimited energy, which is what this is, you could create technology and devices beyond your wildest imaginings and dreams. Essentially, to quote the brightest minds, Tom Dawson, he said, what I have discovered, right now he's a Sony top manager in their television division. He said, I had discovered the source of the non-decaying spin of the electron. So, and that knows that it's infinite and doesn't decay, and we don't know why. So anyway, these are schematics, they're blueprints, and I have to explain how to ramp it up and energize it, make it more powerful, and hopefully I'll get to that. Thank you for all your time. Appreciate it.